Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Brian if you're new around here. And what we're going to do today is we're going to dive into the White Mage and set up your experience, whether you're level 1 or all the way to level 90 for a controller. This is going to be a setup where we're going to walk through a lot of information. And as this guide goes, I would highly encourage you to check out the chapter markers in case this is going to cover things that you already know or you don't necessarily need from this specific guide. Being that I don't know if this is your first experience here on the channel, and if it is, welcome. Hopefully you enjoy the video, and if you have any questions, just ask, hit me up in the comments. I'll be sure to make sure you get what you need. But also, if you're a returning veteran of controller guides, welcome back. I'm really thankful that you're coming in and checking out this video. Also, if you're completely new or if you want to sit here and get the best setup possible, check the pinned comment on this video. That pinned comment is going to have a link so that way you can get the macros that I'm going to show you in this video. Those macros are actually going to insta set up your hotbars. Those are going to just be click and play and have a great day. And the best part of these macros is that as I update my own setup, I'll keep these macros up to date as well. So that way, if you're watching this video in the future, some changes have been made, patches have been rolled out, and I have yet to be able to release an updated controller guide for you. Note that you can always go check the macros and be using the latest setup that I'm currently on, that I've been tested and I feel really confident in. And also to try and make this as easy as possible, if you're looking for any other controller guides for the job or just a deep dive into how to play with a controller in Final Fantasy XIV, on my homepage for this channel, I have my Endwalker controller guides playlist. Check that out as I get these controller guides updated for Endwalker. That's where they're going to live. If you're still waiting on a new updated controller guide, you can always use the Shadowbringers playlist to find the guide that you need. And just note, outside of things like obviously, Reaper and Sage, Summoner, Monk, maybe a little bit of Ninja, there's not that, it's not that radical. I think it should give you a good starting point for an entry as you wait for me to get those other ones finished. Anyway, outside of that, just check that playlist. Whether you're watching this, right when the game is launched or later in the future, you're going to see the whole set of jobs rolled out into that playlist here in the near future. So this is going to be a video that's an all-encompassing guide. We're going to show you first how you set up for controller play. If you've seen these guides before, if you've seen my detailed controller guide, you can completely skip that next section and jump right into the White Mage skill overview, in which we're going to do and talk about the various skills that you have. This is going to help out 1 to 90 players as you level. From there, I'm going to dive into my skill layout. This is where those macros are going to come into play, so that way you can instantly have them mapped and you don't have to worry about how I've got them placed and how to, pause the video. Literally just run the macros and copy and paste them and run the macros, and you're going to be good to go. Then we're going to talk about my HUD layout, and I'll show you guys some of the things that I use there. Then finally, I'll finish with any kind of macros that I'm using for ground targeting, talk about macros for a little bit, and finally, I'll show off my Glamour gear, what I'm currently using at the time of this recording. And so that brings us to chapter 1. Let's talk about setting up for controller play. Now, whether you are currently set up on controller or you're using keyboard and mouse and thinking about transitioning over, whether you play on PlayStation, any kind of console that might be supported in the future, you can always get to your controller configuration under character configuration. That's going to be under your system menu. To toggle between gamepad mode and controller mode, it's this beautiful little toggle. In fact, you actually have 2 different settings. You have a lot of different options that you can control. And note that whether you're in gamepad mode or mouse and keyboard mode, these settings are linked to that toggle, so you can actually have a really good experience. But the interesting thing is, here I am in mouse and keyboard mode, and my controller still works. But in this case, you can see that how I'm now moving left and right and strafing. But here, now I'm running around in a circle because that's going to use the 2 different types of movement. Now, I prefer for myself under the control settings, under general, I prefer legacy camera-based type movement. So if I kind of zoom out and close out of this window, I like to move around and run around in this fashion. This is just my preference, but the choice is going to be completely up to you. So that's just something that you can kind of toggle around and see what feels best for your style of play. Then under the various filters tab, again, if you guys want more absolute detailed check out the complete controller guide here or the ultimate controller guide over on Work to Game. But you can see here from weapon sheathed and weapon drawn, when my weapon is sheathed, meaning put away, I have these different filters that are listed right here on screen. Non-party PCs, alliance members, all enemies, aggroing enemies, duty specific, and NPC objects. While my weapon is drawn, I only am going to focus in on enemies. To kind of highlight that, let's go ahead and bring in my companion here. He's going to be really nice and help us out with my party list that you can see right here. Now, whenever I am targeting, we see my weapon is away, I can actually target all of my party members as a healer by pressing up and down. And it's just going to 100% focus in on party members and even targeting myself by hitting up and down. So there's a dedicated party control built into your controller setup. But if I want to target, let's say, these targeting dummies, then I can do so by pressing left and right. Now, if my weapon is out, it's not going to focus in on anything else. It's just going to focus in on these specific items. But if my weapon is away, you can see here, I can actually now still target my companion here because he has a different kind of philosophy to him. He's not necessarily acting as a party member, but he is. It is how it is. But just note that whenever like you're in a group, if you're out in the world, you can sit here and have a little bit more control, weapon out or weapon away. The nice thing about it is that just pressing your A button or your X button is going to target your nearest PC. So if you're like running around and these aren't target dummies, you can still target any kind of duty specific, or like, you know, the quest giver. If there's a whole heap of people around you, just pressing A is going to focus in on the nearest NPC, the nearest object. It's actually really intelligent. It's going to save you a lot of time, so you don't have to necessarily stress over that. Overall, like, this is just going to be your preference, but if you're struggling with targeting, note that's going to be a huge help. The other thing is that when I hold down the left trigger or the right trigger, you can see here I've got the various skills highlighted. If you use left bumper and right bumper, on your controller, you can actually still target between various different enemies in this regard. If I go and pick on two right here real quick, target them, you'll see my enemy list being built up over here. I can switch targets by actually holding down the left bumper and pressing up and down. So where up and down is party specific, holding left bumper, L1, it actually acts as an alternate, thus allowing me to switch various targets. So you have a lot of different targeting options. There we go. So so just note that you have those that ability, that focus on at any point in time. So we talked a little bit about targeting, especially with your filters. That's going to be a huge help. The rest of it, I want to jump into hotbar settings. This is going to give you a lot of control regarding display recast times. Keep that on. You see here, I have got display hotbar numbers turned off. If I turn that on, got these little floating numbers, and we'll get into that more into the HUD section. And you can see the various hotbar layouts that I've got. You can see here, I actually have a floating hotbar listed right here, and I'll cover that a little bit more in detail as to why here once we get to the skill layout and HUD layout. But the real critical, points that you want to focus in on is your sharing. Sharing means that if it is checked, that means whatever job you're on, class, crafter, gatherer, class with the conjurer, then becomes the job of the white mage, they're going to have those skills always set up for them. If I pop over here to my number 7 here, I've got my mount roulette, I have my wondrous tales. If I go to my number 8, you can see here I've got my repair. These are always going to be the way they are. So I can end up having various different modes, macros, anything that I want that doesn't necessarily need to change. That's where that's going to be. However, whenever I want to change my job, so if I switch over here to scholar, I don't want my mage skills on my scholar. This is going to help keep that focused in that regards, and that's where the unchecked option comes into play. And you can see here my little option here that I was using for my white mage is no more because I haven't set any skills yet on the scholar that I want to specifically track. And that's really the whole point of these floating options. You're not using your mouse to click on any of these. These are just really important skills that as I am working on mastering the job in the raids, I want to make sure that I never have on cooldown. Like they're not just sitting there not doing anything that I need them to do. So this is just a way that I track that, and we'll go into more these skills and why here in a little bit. Under the cross hotbar section, if I go and move this a little bit more onto the screen for you guys, I have it to always display, but if you really want to have a clean UI setup, if you're doing any kind of options there, you can turn that off. You can also display hotbar help, where if I have it on, you can see the names of the skills themselves listed, but if I go ahead and turn that off, you can see here, it is just a little bit more of a clean experience. I do recommend, as you're learning and as that muscle memory is being built up, you go ahead and keep on display hotbar help in that regards. You're going to want to use hold ultimately, but if you're struggling with it, if you've got your hands are just like you're starting to cramp up, you haven't built up that kind of, I guess gamer hand muscle, if there's a term for it, gamer hermamur, that's where toggle and mix will come into play. You will lose out on some of the features like the expanded cross hotbar, holding the left trigger and the right trigger, and the right trigger and the left trigger. So you do have a little bit of flexibility there with hold. You have all the features under hold, but if you run into, say, like you want toggle, that means you just press it once. You don't have to hold it down, and they're going to be active until you press it again. And mix is a blending of both. You can actually press it or you can hold it. It can kind of trip you up, so just kind of play around with that. Also, the W cross hotbar. This is the double cross hotbar. You see me double tapping left, double tapping right to get into those. You cannot drag and drop skills onto this at all. This is going to be always linked, and that's going to be linked under here, and we'll talk about linking here in a second. But I have it to always display. You can turn it off, but it kind of defeats the purpose because it's just telling me where those skills are. I say return to my cross hotbar after W cross hotbar input. So if I use something like Surecast, I'm automatically still back here on the left hand side. So it is just a nice clean. But if you don't like that and you want to be locked into that until you press a button, you can turn that off. You can also position it separately if you so desire. And then finally, you can also say, if you're struggling with the double tap, you can adjust the input timer window via this option. So if you're struggling with that, check that out. That's going to be really helpful for you. Finally, under the custom options, you can see expanded. Expanded looks at 2 and in this case 2 and 3 right. So you can see here when I hold down left trigger and right trigger, it's literally either this side or that side. This just gives me a nice shortcut into using these skills rather than having to press the R1 button and jump into the various different hotbar layouts. Same thing applies for 3. The thing that ever trips us up is that if I try to drag and drop these skills here, I cannot, but I have to go into 3, and you can see here how it's immediately mirrored and gives me that ability right then and there. So just note that is essentially kind of the real things that trips people up. That's usually the number one question that I get. How do I move and set skills here? The answer is you don't. But if you guys want more detailed information about setting skills, assignments, and more, again, plugging that complete controller guide, it's got everything you need all in one space. All right. So that is essentially getting you started with your controller. That's adjusting you into that. And I think that should be enough to hopefully get you started. And if you guys need anything, again, we got the videos on the playlist. That's going to be huge for you. And yeah, I think now it's time to move into chapter 2. White Mage is such a fascinating job because it's based off of how 1.0 eventually rolled into A Realm Reborn. So you have the concept of classes. All the new jobs introduced are all just straight up a job, but White Mage builds itself off a Conjure, and it's honestly probably the best healer to start off with. I've got a personal opinion about the job and how they all relate to each other. If you guys want to see that video, please sound off in the comments below, and I'll see if I can't get that made for you now that I've got all the healers done. But overall, let's go ahead and dive in and go through the skills so that way you have a good understanding of how these skills interrelate to each other and how they upgrade from one another, and then we'll go into my skill layout. So to start it off, we've got Stone. This is your basic, your normal casting attack. You can see here it's got a cast time, and the White Mage actually casts pretty fast. It's one of the adjustments that they've made in Endwalker, but it deals damage with a potency of 140, and it's learned at level 1. At level 2, you learn Cure. This is going to restore a target's HP with a potency. Now, overall, note that you have various different traits. While I won't go overall into them as much, just note that as you level up, these skills, as you see here, are set at level 90 based off of my gear. So when you start playing, you might see that the potency, like the recast, the cast time, is different from what I'm showing you today, but note that it is still going to be your base healing spell, and it also gives a 15% chance that your Cure 2 is going to cost no MP. Then you have Aereo. This is your dot attack. This is going to deal wind damage with a potency of 50. It's an instant cast spell, and it's going to last essentially 18 seconds at the start, but as you level it up, it's eventually going to turn into a 30-second window for your dot. Medica is your AoE heal. This is going to restore your HP and the party members around you. And right now, it's got a potency of 400. Raise is going to resurrect a target in a weakened state. You can see here it costs quite a heavy chunk of MP. You're going to usually want to pair that with Thin Air at all costs just to save you that MP. White Mage definitely feels the MP issue at the moment. So then you have Stone 2. This is an upgrade spell from Stone 1. It's got basically increasing the damage from 140 to 190. Cure 2, as you can see here, it has a higher level potency, costs obviously more MP, so it can really easily drain your MP overall, but that potency is definitely going to help you out in the long run. Aereo 2 is the upgrade from Aereo, in this case a higher damage potency. It's still lasting 18 seconds. And then finally, the last skill you have under the Conjurer class is Medica 2. This is going to be that AoE heal, but it's going to have a cure potency of 250 with a regen effect added to it, with a potency of 150 that's going to last for 15 seconds. Then as we get into the White Mage job, you get Presence of Mind. Right now with a recast of 2 minutes, this is going to reduce your spell cast time and the recast time and your auto attack delay by 20 seconds. So this is going to be something you want to constantly be using, especially in damage burst windows. It's going to make you much more effective in putting out damage even faster. Regen is a healing over time, a hot if you're new to MMOs. This has got a cure potency of 250 and it's going to last for 18 seconds. Cure 3 restores HP of targets to all party members nearby that target. So you don't have to be them. It's not emanating from you, but if you need an AoE cure at a range, Cure 3 is the spell that you want to use. It's got a decent cure potency, but note that Cure 3 isn't better than Cure 2. The Cure 2 has a higher single target potency. This allows you to have an AoE from a range cure potency rather than Medica 2. I rarely use Cure 3 personally speaking, but you can still have this as an option if needed. Holy is going to deal unexpected damage with a potency of 140 to all nearby enemies. It's got a longer cast time that you will feel, but it also applies a stun. It also is going to emanate from you as the player, so note that you're going to have to run up and kind of put yourself maybe in a little bit of danger to cast Holy, and it's honestly, I think it's definitely worth it. All right, Benediction. This is going to insta restore all HP of your target. This is a White Mage unique ability learned at level 50. It's got a 180-second recast time, so you're not using it all the time, but ultimately I wouldn't sleep on Benediction. It's really important. You can use this especially in tank, like if there's trouble, you can instantly get any target right back up. So don't worry about the fact that it's got a 180-second recast time in the long run. Then you got Aphilus Solace. This is an instant ability that's going to use your lilies. Your lilies is the gauge that builds up over time when you're in combat. And you can see here I'm using a simple gauge. Again, we'll cover more of that in the HUD layout. And you can see here as it fills up. Now, as you use these lilies, you're going to build up a blood lily, which is these items right here on the UI, and that's going to give you the ability to do, like, obviously Aphilus Misery. So that's something where you'll see memes about blood for the blood lily, like I feed off your pain. Elysium is a ground target ability, and we'll talk about more macros for ground targets here in the macro section. But this is going to have a cure potency of 100, and it's going to last for 24 seconds. So anybody standing in that is going to have a nice little AoE heal. It also is going to increase HP recovery via healing actions on party members in that designated area by 10%. So this is a really great ability to have. It's got a 90-second cooldown. Stone 3, the upgraded version of Stone 2, with a potency of 230 in this case. So there you go. Then you've got a size. This is actually really important, especially in MP management, because it's going to restore 5% of your maximum MP. This is also dealing damage. It's going to heal. It's going to hurt. You should always be making sure you're getting your sizes out there, especially as a White Mage. Then at 58, you get Thin Air. This is going to right now give you 2 charges, which is going to make whatever your next spell free. It's not going to cost MP. This is perfect to pair with your raise because that's going to save you all kinds of MP. But if you ever need it, especially in your rotations, if you find yourself hurting for MP, make sure you're checking out Thin Air. Then you got Tetragrammaton. This is a insta cast 60-second cooldown, 700 potency cure. So while it's only got one, option on it, this is a really good spell because it is off your global cooldown. Therefore, you're not going to have to wait, to do anything else. So this is going to be a nice ability to weave in to heal while you're doing any kind of damage. Then you have Stone 4. This has got your maximum potency here now at 270. This is your upgraded version of Stone. Then Divine Benson. This is going to put a shield around you or the target party member that's going to basically act as a 500 potency cure on that target. And as it upgrades later in the game, as you level up, you actually get 2 charges of it. So it actually is incredibly helpful. Then you have Plenary Indulgence. This is going to grant confession to self and nearby party members, and upon receiving HP recovery magic via Medica 2, Cure 3, or Aphilus Rapture cast by self, confession triggers an additional healing effect. So this is great to pair with any of those healing spells. Medica 2, Medica, even Aphilus Rapture, that's going to help. Even Cure 3. So just note that when you're looking at that, if you're really needing to get people back up, that's going to be a great ability to use. All right. Arrow eventually upgrades into Dia. This deals unexpected damage with 60, and this gives you that 30-second window in terms of that dot living on that on your target. Then we go into Glare. Glare is going to give, it's the upgraded version of Stone, increasing its potency to 290. Then you have Aphilus Misery. This is going to deal unexpected damage to all enemies nearby with a potency of 900 for the first enemy and 25% less for all remaining enemies. And it's going to consume it can only be used when you have 3 stacks of your Blood Lily. So note that you want to be using your Aphilus Rapture, you want to be using your Aphilus Solace. That's going to help feed your Blood Lily and thus getting you up to this ability, which is incredibly powerful. So Aphilus Rapture, this is going to restore your HP and the HP of all nearby party members with 400. It's off the global cooldown, so you can still do your attack windows and be able to pop this off really easily, especially with the insta cast. If you need to move, it gives you a lot of different options. At level 80, you get Temperance. This is going to increase your healing magic potency by 20% while reducing damage taken by self and all party members within a radius of 30 yams by 10%. So as these bigger hits are coming in, Temperance is a great ability to help reduce damage that is going out to the entire party, increases your healing potency. It's got a 2-minute recast, but don't sleep on Temperance. Plus, it just looks really cool. Then you've got Glare 3. Ultimately, I wonder if this will ever get moved to Glare 2 in terms of its naming, because you go from Glare to Glare 3. This has got the biggest potency attack for your single target at 310 potency for the White Mage. Then also you have Holy 3. In this case, I'm just curious if it's going to ever be renamed to Holy 2. But overall, it's going to have damage of 150 to all nearby enemies. It still has that stun, and it looks just gorgeous. At level 86, you get Aqua Veil. This is going to reduce damage taken by your party member or self by 15%. It's got 60-second recast. It's another way of mitigating damage that is coming in to any particular target. And then finally, your level 90 ability, Liturgy of the Bell. This is going to place a Healing Blossom at the designated location and grant 5 stacks of Liturgy of the Bell to self. Now, when you take damage, you're going to actually expend 1 stack of the bell to heal self and party members within a radius of 20 yams with a cure potency of 400. You'll notice it's a little bit less than a basic cure, which is really nice to have, and with that AoE. So the effect of this action can only be triggered once per second. The Healing Blossom is going to dissipate when all stacks are expended or the effect expires. Any remaining stacks of the bell, when the effect expires, will trigger an additional healing effect for 200 for every remaining stack of the bell itself. So think about it. If you've got 5 stacks, you don't take any damage, to yourself, but everybody else takes damage. That's essentially 1,000 potency cure. That's awesome. That's a really big heal. Now that's going to get mitigated if you take damage, but it's still putting out more healing. It's going to put out 400 potency heals if you're getting hit. So this is great to sit here and defend against any area raid wide damage that you know is coming. This is just a really good, in an interesting way, a preventative healing that has that pure cast healing going on in and of itself. And with that, that is our skill overview for the White Mage. If you guys have any questions, let me know. But now let's go ahead and talk about my skill layout. When it comes to your skill layout, note that placement is everything. Muscle memory is also going to be key. And finally, whenever you look at what kind of controller you're using, be it PS5 or like an Xbox or any kind of layout, you have a couple of options. Offset sticks is usually my preferred because I feel it gives me the ability to move and still hit the up, down, left, and right buttons on the D-pad. But overall, when you think about how you want to target, how you want to engage, you want to think about your abilities on the A, B, X, and Y as the most accessible skills that you need at any given time. This isn't going to be a hard and fast, like, definitive rule, because there's not going to be all the time that you have to be moving. But overall, if you want to be moving and have the ability to use any kind of skill, any kind of cooldown, you want to be able to move and press that ability. And so that's kind of the logic typically that I use with these guides. Now, obviously, you can see here my layout is that, and again, check out the macros, check out the pinned comment of this video, so that way you can just copy and paste and make this an easy, fast setup for you, but then make it your own. Take it, figure out what works, what's most comfortable for you, what works with your muscle memory, so that way you have the easiest time available. Now, when I talk about these skills, I'm going to talk about them at their level 90s, but note that if I went in and actually set stone on any particular hotbar, watch, it's just going to upgrade right there to glare. So as you level up, especially if you're that one, to sub 90 range, as you get these skills and get them set, even with the macros, they're going to set the lower level versions so that way they just automatically upgrade for you and you don't have to worry about it. So when you see glare, note that that's stone. If you're just getting started out, you see dia, note that's arrow in this case. So typically you see here, I've got the W cross hotbar in play, and I've also got my expanded cross hotbar. From the system character configuration, I'm using hotbar 2 left and right and 3 left and right for the W cross hotbar. So that's what I've got that set up, and I'll walk you through that. I also, from a weapon sheathing perspective, when my weapon is drawn, I'm only going to keep it locked into hotbar 1. With your weapon out, you can press R1 and easily jump through any number of hotbars that you wish, but I tend to keep those locked out because I'm already using them with the expanded and the W cross hotbar. So that's a little bit hopefully helpful, especially when it comes down to thinking about it. And we'll also talk about again why I've got these skills listed right here. But starting over here on the left hand side, I got Liturgy of the Bell, Temperance, and then I have a Tendicure of Mind. I have not yet upgraded this to the latest version of it. Obviously I've used all my Tendicures when I was testing and rating, etc. But note that this is something to help boost up your damage, especially as a white mage, and it's really good for these damage windows in the long run. And here I've got Divine Benson. You can see here it's on that easy double tap and press to be able to access on the move. I have Lucid Dreaming as a white mage. You want to make sure this is being used as much as possible. I feel like I really struggle with MP in Endwalker right now with white mage. I've got Rescue in case I need to help get a buddy out of bad. And then finally, I've got Surecast, which allows me to kind of nullify any kind of drawback effects. This is a part of your roll actions. Same thing with Lucid Dreaming. That's why you didn't see it as a part of the White Mage skills overview. But check out your roll actions. You want to make sure you have those set. What I end up doing typically, and I'm not going to do it specifically in this video, if I am jumping between healers and having similar skills, I try to put them in the same spot so that muscle memory becomes easier. Overall, being that you might just be playing one job, I'm not necessarily laying out all my guides that very way. I find something very comfortable that works for the job specifically, rather than having to worry about trying to balance it across all the roles. But maybe that'll be a video for later down the line. Then here on the left hand side, holding down left trigger, Presence of Mind, giving me that faster attack, especially with all of my attacks. Asylum. Then I've got Plenary Indulgence, Affluous Rapture here on the left hand side again. I focus this kind of on my DPS side by holding down left trigger. I think about it if I was playing like a first person shooter, like I hold down the trigger to aim and then I hold down the right trigger to fire. But in this case, I hold down left trigger to kind of get into that damage focus mode. Assize, Affluous Mastery here on the B button. The Y button, Assize, Glare 3, and Dia, kind of as my wheel of pain. Now, what I do is, since I hold down, I'm already holding down left trigger. If I hold down right trigger, I go into my expanded mode where I have access to Raise, Swift Cast, Holy 3, aka maybe 2, Assize again, Repose, then still the Plenary Indulgence, Affluous Rapture, and Thin Air. So that's essentially like if I pop over to 2, you can see that listed here: Plenary Indulgence, Rapture, Thin Air, Repose, Assize, Raise, which is set as a macro. If you run my macros, it will override the raise macro. And being some of the changes they made in Endwalker, it's not necessarily needed to macro it specifically anymore. But note, I'll show you guys that here in the macro section. Then I've got Swiftcast, Holy 3, etc. Same here on the right hand side for Hotbar 2. Lily of the Bell, or Liturgy of the Bell, that's also macro to go to the specific target. Again, using those macros I give you won't set the macro itself. You have to go and equip the macro manually. Swiftcast, Raise, Temperance, Affluous Rapture, my Limit Break, and Thin Air. So hopefully you're not limit breaking that much as a healer, but it is important to have access to, especially if it ever you need it. When you need it and you don't have it, you're going to really feel its missing presence. So that's the damage. That's the expanded damage, kind of tapping into a little bit more AoE focus for the White Mage. And then again on the right hand side, this is kind of where I get into my hard casting healing. Ultimately, when we talk about the White Mage and trying to do the most damage, hard cast healing isn't necessarily the best, but it does give you, and it is there if obviously needed. Cure 1, Cure 2. Again, these are different spells overall. Cure 2 is going to drain your MP really quickly. You have 10,000. Basically, that is 10 Cure 2s and you're done. But Cure has the ability to proc into Cure 2. Don't be afraid of using Cure 2 if essentially you need it. And then essentially I would point you first to Tetragrammaton. A little bit less powerful, but it's instacast. And that way you're not sitting here having to worry about hard casting. This is really great to get somebody up first and putting that off a cooldown. So prioritize Tetragrammaton over Cure 1, Cure 2, obviously depending on their life. Regen in this case is, instacast as well. This is going to be a nice little cure for you. Insuna, I have right here. This is going to remove additional detriment effects. This is the cross-roll ability. Medica 2, and Divine Benson. Now, typically you want to, if you're going to really need people to get up, you do want to pair Plenary Indulgence with Medica 2, whatever you're casting, or even Rapture. You'll see here I usually try to do this because these are off the global cooldown, so I'm not sitting here have to hard cast, but if necessary, if you really need it and you don't have any Raptures, note that you can go ahead and pair those. So it's actually not that bad. You can pop in, pop out. I do try to avoid as much popping back and forth between left and right trigger thoughts, but that's just essentially how I function with it. On the W cross hotbar right, which is hotbar 3, I've got Benediction, I've got Temperance, Affluous Solace, which again is kind of tying with Tetragrammaton, but it is based off of the Lily system here. So with that aspect, the fact that it is that 800 potency cure, you'll notice that is tied with Cure 2. This is a much better focused target spell on specifically any target because it also will feed your damage. Then you have Aquaveil, which I'm so glad they brought that in from as a Final Fantasy 11 player. I'm really happy to see that. Affluous Rapture again, and then Cure 3 with a Swift Cast and an X Ether if I ever need to give myself some MP. Now, of course, I'm out of it at the moment. So that is essentially the layout, and that will hopefully give you some insight into my logic and how I decide to choose to lay out my skills. This should hopefully be a good starter, a primer, and then you can kind of make it your own. If you make any changes to this, sound off in the comments. Let me know what you've done specifically. I'm always curious to checking it out. You can also post pictures in the Discord, and that way we can always talk about it because I love the theory. I love the crafting of how skills are laid out to help with that. Now, we've covered the skill layout. Now we're into the next chapter. Welcome to HUD layout. And you'll see here, I've actually got hotbar 4 here. The reason for 4, when you actually look at your various hotbars, you can see that they don't have skill assignment options to them, which keeps the icons themselves very clean. So if I click on 4, I can always click on settings and I can change out its structured layout. I can also change its size as well. And so you can even... You can even make it less transparent or more. It's really up to you on what makes the most sense for your skills. So it gives you a lot of flexibility, but that is one option that I've got laid out. I've got my, essentially, let me go and cancel out of those settings. Yeah. I've got my cross hotbar, and then my W cross hotbar is listed and tied in there. I have hotbar 3 here in case I want to give myself any additional messages or cooldowns. Somebody said from coming over from WoW, they're like weak auras in that regards. I'm not a WoW guy, so just take that for what it is. I've got my parameter bar listed here, my healing gauge. Then I've got status enfeeblements, my progress bar, my enhancements, And if you actually look at any of the statuses, if you don't see it like that, I have it set up to split into 3 groups. You can even set it up to split in 4 groups, because over here in the upper right hand corner, I've got my status info, like my food buffs, my free company buffs. I don't need to see them at all times. Those are just going to list and live up there. I've got my target bar listed up here, my experience bar listed there, and then behind it, I've got my limit gauge bar as well. Party list and enemy list are according, and I play actually in an ultra wide, which is really nice. But those are the layouts I have. I actually do not use a mini map when playing Final Fantasy 14. If you guys want to know more, I've been working on a video for the last couple months, and hopefully you guys enjoy that video. It's really quite exciting for me to explore that idea. But yeah, those are my layouts. And so let's talk about like why these skills. So if you're on a, like a PlayStation, you don't have access to the mouse, hold down L1, press the right stick as a click, and all of a sudden your right stick now becomes the mouse cursor. Left click or left trigger and right trigger act as your left and right triggers. So you can actually sit here and just like automatically move these things around. So setting these skills is going to be imperative. The reason why is that I want to make sure that when I'm focused in the zone, like if I'm sitting here targeting and focusing, that I'm not sitting here missing out on any particular skills, especially when I start analyzing myself, trying to improve my gameplay and do better, trying to improve my rankings and do better. This is where I want to make sure I'm using these abilities. So whenever it's saying I'm not hitting a global cool, like when I'm missing things, that's where I want to make sure I'm trying to bring these into attention. So whatever skills you feel are the most important to be using, that you don't want to miss a window on, drag them in, like keep them right in your insight. If you think about typically when you're playing overall, like if you're focused and you're 100% looking down at these skills themselves, you might be missing kind of what's going on up here. So give yourself the ability to kind of take your focus, not necessarily on looking at these skills, but lifting it up slightly to where you're getting a bigger picture of what is going on, and as well as what's going on with your party and more. So that's kind of the logic behind it. Again, whatever you decide to set here is really the most important. I like to put things that I just want to make sure that I'm using, especially things that have a little bit of a longer recast time. But I'll leave the choice up to you. But you can see here I've used Presence of Mind, Aqua Veil, Divine Benson, Assize, Liturgy of the Bell, and Atlas Misery, you get it. You know what I'm trying to say in that regards. So we come to, I think, the final chapter in this regards, in which we're going to talk about kind of my macros. Now, again, I said I'll show off my gear for those of you who want to know here in a little bit. But let's talk about user macros, and you might see an overwhelming amount. These are going to be what actually set your skills. So again, check the comment in below. But if we look at like Asylum, this is anything with the ground targeting. If you use this, kind of greater than less than T, this is going to automatically place it at your feet. So I'm going to go and drag this and actually put this on my hotbar, because my my macros override the skill placements will override macros themselves. But yeah, so now I can sit here and check that out. So for example, let's kind of highlight this specifically with Liturgy of the Bell and Asylum. So with Liturgy of the Bell, if I go and use it within Endwalker, they actually made a nice little thing that it won't go past your default window. So if I actually hold down right bumper, I can use the left stick to actually move in place. So I'm holding down right bumper, and now my left stick becomes a ground targeting placement. So this can be very nice in case you're like, okay, I want to precast something. It's really going to be up to you to do that. So let me go ahead and place it by pressing the ability, and now there is my Liturgy of the Bell that's out. However, let's say I don't want to have to deal with that, or I don't want to have to move my camera to kind of put where I want it to go. You can use that macro, and so if I push this, now all of a sudden it's going to set myself up at the target, at the placement where I need it to be. So you can either say, hey, I'm putting it on me, or you can target a party member or an enemy and be able to place things down. Or if you want more specific control, that's where you use the right bumper, and that's where the macros come into play. So note, that's essentially where it is. So if I go and pop into my shared, I think this is where I put Liturgy of the Bell. I did. You can see here, if I drag it in, Liturgy of the Bell with the T target, macro icon, Liturgy of the Bell. Macros are risky. They're like, if they can impact your damage. I see people saying, hey, I'm going to stack this ability, this ability, this ability, and you can do that. I am a big proponent of macros in certain areas, but note that I put macro icon last because essentially that's going to just what sets the skill, what gives it that cooldown effect. And from a coding perspective, that means this is going to execute first. I don't know if you're saving all that much time, but in the end of it, when you're really trying to squeeze out every last bit of damage, every last skill, why not use the macro icon at the end of it? So that's just just going to be an important aspect for it. The other thing I'm using as well is, you see here, you have a spot in the 98 and 99 section under individual. You see here for my movement, I've got my mount, I've got my flying mount roulette, and I've got my sprint. So how I actually have that set up is under system configuration, under controller, and then under button configuration, I go to begin. And then here under the clicking of the right stick, I have execute macro 99. What this will actually give me is the ability. So if I just press it while standing here, I will mount. If you're in a dungeon and you can't summon mounts, it's just going to fail through and go to the next thing. So you can actually mount and dismount by just clicking down on the right stick. If I'm running and jump, I can actually click it, and now I'm actually sprinting. In any place where you cannot have a mount, it will default to your sprint, and thus essentially I don't have sprint listed on any of my bars because I don't need it. Essentially it is just a click of the button, and that is essentially a macro that I have got set up for use on the White Mage. And with that, I know lots of people like to always see what I've got laid out, what I've got set up for my character at this moment of this time of recording. Currently a gear score of 570. I am rocking a 580 crafted weapon, the classical cane, high quality. Then from my head perspective, I've got the elegant, which is the trophy and circlet. Let me actually drag that a little bit more in for my HUD. 1 second, my item help, just to make it a little bit more visible for you guys. The telephony circuit, which is the elegant rim glasses. Then, so it's essentially the glasses is what you're seeing macroed. For my body, the Moonwood top of healing is 570. I've got an antiquated healing for the White Mage, 7th heaven top. The telephony gloves, which is the Keno note of healing. I cannot pronounce these things, but at least that you can see them. The Gensha is the Moonward bottoms of healing, and the Gensha Tesu Kama Hapa Dabadubadu. Feet to the telephony thigh boots, which is antiquated 7 heaven thigh boots. Right hand side, I've got the last earrings of healing, the classical choker of healing, the last bracelet of healing, the classical ring of healing, and another classical ring of healing for my right hand side to bring up my gear score to currently 570. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did and you feel like I earned it, leave a like. If you're new around here and you hit that subscribe button. I like covering MMORPGs beyond just Final Fantasy XIV, but I do have a passion. I've been talking about this game for 13 years, and it's going to have an incredible another 10 years, a brighter future. It's going to be crazy when I'm sitting here going to say, hey, I've been covering this game for 23 years. That's essentially what we're looking to be set up with this game. I'm here to help. The goal of is just to help you guys out. Hopefully you have fun. You don't owe me anything. I just hope that you enjoy Final Fantasy XIV. If there's anything I can do to make it more enjoyable, sound off in the comments. Hit us up on Discord. Join us for a live stream. One way or the other, just let me know how you can enjoy Final Fantasy more, and I'll see if I can get you that content and help you out in your experience with this incredible game. Thanks so much for your time, your attention, and hopefully you have a fantastic day. Hopefully I'll see you next time, but until then, take care.
A little off topic, but I just want to say thank you for providing me a friendly, fun, and optimistic community. Baby. Coming from an MMO community filled with toxicity, this is an amazing breath of fresh air. Keep it up, baby. Oh, yeah.